Where do you get your ideas? The storyteller's nightmare question. Let's talk about that. Hello again, welcome back to Creative Writing Corner. I am your host, writing coach, and author Luke J. Morris, and today we are going to talk about idea generation. Where do you get your ideas? What is a good story idea? Well, the answer again is simple, like most of my answers are going to be. The answer is anything. I repeat, anything. Anything can be a good story idea. Just saying that it can be doesn't mean it necessarily is. But anything can be. A lot of people, especially non-writers, make a big deal about ideas. They think ideas are the core of writing. And all you have to do is have a good idea, and then you're going to have a good book. You're going to have a good movie. You're going to have a good TV show, a good play, a good comic, just on the basis of a good idea. And that's not really what it's about. Ideas are just the baseline. They're just the base starting material. And you can honestly start almost anywhere and come up with a good idea. Ideas are everywhere. You can write a good idea out of a blade of grass. Leonard Reed told a fantastical parable that really detailed the laws of economics in I, Pencil. Ernest Hemingway makes us feel longing and loneliness in Cat in the Rain, which is a short story about, wait for it, a cat in the rain. Mark Twain, the greatest American author ever, wrote such classic tales as About Barbers and About Smells and My Watch. All true titles of Mark Twain stories. Look them up. There are no bad ideas. Damn it. Pardon my French. I know that's not French, but whatever. So, where do ideas come from? Good ideas. Any ideas. Where do you get your ideas? Neil Gaiman, author of Coraline, Stardust, The Sandman, American Gods, and Good Omens with Terry Pratchett. All of those have been made into TV shows or movies. Look them up. They're fantastic. Just read the books. I highly recommend them. Neil Gaiman's possibly my favorite living author right now. He gives a simplest and best answer to this question that I've ever heard. Where do you get your ideas? I make them up, he says in his tremendous British accent that I can't even begin to copy. I make them up out of my head. See, that's not even good, but I make them up out of my head, is what he says. And he goes on to tell the truth that every writer knows, about which every wannabe writer has no actual clue, which is that the ideas aren't the hard bit. They're a small component of the whole. Creating believable people who do more or less what you tell them to is much harder. And the hardest by far is the process of simply sitting down and putting one word after another to construct whatever it is you're trying to build, making it interesting, making it new. That's a direct quote from Neil Gaiman, and I will link to his essay. It's on his website. I'll link to that in the show notes, so take a look. It's the writing that's the hard part. That's where the work comes in. Ideas are just food to sustain us. As Ray Bradbury, one of my other favorite authors, author of Fahrenheit 451, The Martian Chronicles, Something Wicked This Way Comes, and about half of the great American short stories of the 20th century, puts it in his book Zen in the Art of Writing. Highly recommended. I'll link to that as well. Ideas lie everywhere, like apples fallen and melting in the grass for lack of wayfaring strangers with an eye and a tongue for beauty, whether absurd, horrific, or genteel. Ideas are everywhere. They lie everywhere. Bradbury talks about how he started writing stories by making lists, and this is a very good technique if you just need an idea, if you just need something to start with, some ground from which your story can spring. He writes out this list of story ideas that become story titles that then he would go on to sell, and many of these became fantastic stories in their own right. The lake, the ravine, the attic, the basement, the trapdoor, the baby, the crowd, the night train, the foghorn, the scythe, the carnival, the mirror maze, the skeleton. Bradbury goes on to say, if you are a writer or would hope to be one, similar lists dredged out of the lopside of your brain might well help you discover you, even as I flopped around and finally found me. I began to run through those lists, pick a noun, and then sit down to write a long prose poem essay on it. Somewhere along about the middle of the page, or perhaps on the second page, the prose poem would turn into a story, which is to say that a character suddenly appeared and said, "That's me," or "That's an idea I like," and the character would then finish the tale for me. Gaiman suggests beginning the idea generation process by asking yourself questions. So, Bradbury says make a list. And I'm going to have you guys do this. This is going to be part of your homework assignment. Spoiler alert to the end of the episode. You guys are going to make your own list of nouns, of titles. But I'm also going to give you some ideas of my own, some titles I came up with that might be the germ of your story idea. So I'm not going to leave you guys hanging. Don't worry about that. We'll get to it. Back to Neil Gaiman. He suggests the idea process generation starts with asking yourself questions. He says you get ideas from daydreaming, you get ideas from being bored, you get ideas all the time. The only difference between writers and other people is that we notice when we're doing it. You get ideas when you ask yourself simple questions. The most important of these questions is, what if? What if you woke up with wings? What if an airplane crashed through your roof? What if the world itself decided to swallow you up? What if your sister was actually an alien? All sorts of what-if questions you could ask. Another important question, if what if is not the right starting point for you, if only. If only real life was like it was in Hollywood musicals. If only I could disappear whenever my teacher looked at me. If only I had $1 million given to me by an uncle who I never met. You might have heard of some of these story ideas. Some of them have been developed into full stories in themselves. I'm coming up with some of these if-onlys and what-ifs myself. They're not Neil Gaiman's necessarily, but he's got his own list. Go ahead and check out his essay. Come up with your own list of if-onlys and what-ifs. There are other questions. I wonder what she does when she's alone. Or if this goes on. If this goes on, telephones are going to start talking to each other and cut out the middleman. Nowadays, we no longer use telephones as telephones, so that's hardly even a relevant one anymore. If this goes on, the internet is going to be all that exists, and conscious human life is going to go by the wayside. Scary. Or wouldn't it be interesting if the world used to be ruled by cats? You guys who know Gaiman's work might have known that storyline from The Sandman. Very fun storyline where the world did used to be run by cats. And the only reason it's not anymore is getting any two cats to agree on something and do the same thing at the same time is virtually impossible. I have 2 cats, I know. So here's a question. What if you wrote a story today? If only that story had an ordinary beginning before the world turned weird. Wouldn't it be interesting if the protagonist lost in the end, but still won? As I like to say, whenever my students start posing the what-if questions, what if the moon fell down? What if is a terrible question when it's posed by little kids, because they're constantly asking questions. My students aren't little kids, they're teenagers, but they have that same little kid mentality where it's what if this, what if that, what if this, what if that. Yeah, it gets annoying when people ask you that, but follow that trail. Use that as you're brainstorming to write your own story. What if this did happen? What if that plant over in the corner of my yard suddenly decided to come to life and start eating people who walked by? What if the walls that surround my little backyard here in this desert area that I live in were actually made of the desert itself, and they decided one day to just fall down and expose me to all my neighbors. And all of my neighbors' walls fell down as well, and suddenly we all had to see each other all the time. What if that happened? I just came up with that, and that's freaking me out. So I may end up having to write that story. But moving on, no promises. Ideas, again, there are millions of them. They're constantly going through up here, and it's only the ones that stick, the ones that really become stories themselves, that are ones I follow through with. So I did some of my own brainstorming not too long ago, and this is the list I came up with. This is the list of story ideas, story titles from Ray Bradbury's exercise here, writing down just the nouns, the titles that you come up with. My first story idea, brainstorm. If you're brainstorming, what does that mean? What is a brainstorm? Let's delve into that. Evil monkey versus alien robot. I have an idea for this as metafiction, like Lost in the Funhouse by John Barth. Check that one out too. Pirate Ninja Viking, a triple threat. On the matter of invincibility. The Chinese Room, with all respect to John Searle. On the matter of coffee and loss. When the highlighter broke. Every student's worst nightmare. Tape. That's it, just tape. What story can you tell with just tape? Shadow boxer. I'm a martial artist myself, and so shadowboxing is something I do. But what is a shadow boxer? That could be fun to explore. To the pain. Got that from one of my favorite screenwriters, William Goldman. You guys probably remember the movie. Ancient roads we walk. That sounds pretentious, but also sounds kind of cool. I remember when... ... or ellipsis if you want to be correct. If the plan had worked. Desk, dark, disaster. It's alliterative, and it opens up a question in the reader's mind. And then, last but not least, to the owner of a 6-foot shoe. What kind of letter are you going to write to the owner of a 6-foot shoe? Take any of those ideas, if you want to, and explore them. Create your own story out of them, or your own germ of a story, if you want. Otherwise, come up with your own list and see which one of those, which item on your list inspires a story from you. Or just pick one at random and start writing and see where it goes. Stephen King. You guys probably know who he is. He says that stories are fossils that a writer digs up, a section at a time, using the best tools at his or her disposal. So, stories are not something we make up, necessarily. They're something we found. They're found things. They aren't written. They're found objects. Whether that's true in fact or not, obviously, we write stories ourselves. We come up with them out of our own heads. But to treat them as found objects, to approach the craft as if you are digging something out of the ground, really opens up the possibilities. It's your job. You have to take the tools in your toolbox, your grammar, your vocabulary, your life experiences, the books you've read, the movies you've watched. You have to take those tools and use them to dig up the most perfect fossil you can find. Now, again, we're not aiming for perfection in story. Perfect is not in the ballpark. It's never going to be perfect. There's going to be cracks, there'll be fissures, there'll be missing pieces, and that's okay. Go out there and dig up your fossil. Want a hint to get started? Okay, here's your exercise. I'm going to clarify all this for you. Think of a story you've always wanted to read. This is an assignment that I have given to my creative writing class every year that I've been teaching. I've been teaching it for 5 years now. I've got my master's degree in the subject. I don't want to call myself an expert on story, but if I have an expertise, this is it. So think of a story that you've always wanted to read, because I can guarantee you this is going to get something out of you. Something that, if you read it, would excite you to your core. It would make you laugh, make you cry, make you think, or just while away the time in something more fun and interesting than your own humdrum existence. Here's the catch, though. When you're thinking of this story, the story has never been written. You've never read it because you've never had the chance to. You've never seen it on screen because no one's ever made it. No one's read this story. No one's seen this story. No one knows this story. But it's a story you've always wanted to hear. You've always wanted to see. Or maybe you didn't even realize you always wanted to see it, but you know now that it's what's always been missing. This is the story that needs to exist in this world. Sorry, I had a frog in my throat there. Anyway, what would a story like that involve? What kind of characters would it have? Who would be the hero or the villain? Where would it take place? And when? What would happen to change the hero throughout the story? Would she or he live or die? Would they find true love or heartbreak? Would they win the day or sacrifice it? Think of that story. Now, write a one-paragraph summary of that story, that untold story. The story you want to read now, damn it, come hell or high water or bad cliches. Give as much detail as you want. Give everything that excites you about that story. The story that needs to be told. Give me the details that tell you the story that needs to be told. Now, write your paragraph. Sum it up. It's just an elevator pitch. Sum up that story. Then reread it. Let that story excite you all over again. Then, if the mania grabs you, find someone, grab them, shake them, and tell them all about why they have to hear this story before another minute goes by. And then tell them the story. If you don't want to grab someone and tell them the story, write the dang story. Do the work. Write it out. Write it out in summary at first. Write out an outline. Or if you're feeling motivated, script the whole thing. And then come back and tell me all about it. That's your homework. You've got your assignment. Go find an idea. Create your ideas out of thin air. Dig them up like fossils out of the ground. And start telling the story. I hope this works out for you guys. Hope it gave you some ideas or inspiration. I've been Luke Morris. This has been Creative Writing Corner. Until next time, write on, my friends. Hello, fellow writers. Thanks for watching Creative Writing Corner. I do appreciate your support. I hope this helped you out. If it did, feel free to subscribe, like, share on all the platforms. Hit that little notification bell. Make sure you get notified of any future videos, any future writing tips. And if you have any ideas for future Creative Writing Corner episodes, please leave your comments in the comments below. Right on. We'll see you later.